Alright guys, welcome back to Island TV right here on Mid Media SKN with your faves as I'm Sans Kevin featuring Jade, Gwenny Gwen, Idita, CPL, Matter, Stuart Johnson.
The phoneless.
The phoneless.
Yes,
The
you have to add that to my name this week.
Everybody trying to reach Jade, checking me. I said, watch here, am I my sister's keeper?
Yes, this week.
Apparently. But guys, we have in the studio a very special guest friend of this show, Dr. Terrance Drew. Dr. Drew, how you doing?
Hey, I'm well, man. Good morning to all of you. I like the vibes at Island Tea.
Thank you.
And so it's a
you.
pleasure to be
We
here.
try.
Anytime.
Yeah, man. But I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and hang out with us because last week actually. I think last week we actually did an article that spoke to the anniversary of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, and we really thought it would be cool to have a conversation. With someone to just let us know, one, about what's happening with the anniversary, but also speak a bit about the legacy of the party, because we understand how important a role the Labour Party has played, not only in the development of St. Kitts Nevis, but also just labour movements across the Caribbean. But firstly, say happy anniversary to you and to the rest of the party. 90 in a little bit of years.
No, boy, that's a big feat.
Right. So I want to thank you very, very much, of course. And I'm, the newly elected leader of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party. And our party started in earnest on the 25th of January, 1932. And the first leader was Manchester. And as you said, 90 years is not a little bit of years. I want to add, and I know your audience is a younger audience sometimes, that they should know that our party, and we have been researching it well, and I would say if there's information to prove us differently, we are open to it. But we strongly believe that we are the oldest active political party in the English-speaking Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
So
That
when
is
you
a
look
great
at
feat.
even Jamaica and so forth, we are the oldest standing.
Well, with the mother colony, we bought these things.
And our party has remained active. And it has remained active not because of its name, but because it has always responded to the needs of our people at different juncture in our development. So from generation to generation, our principles remain the same. We have what we call universal principles. Those principles don't change. The motto of our party is for the good that we can do. And we extend that. And that has been the guiding force behind all that we would have done. I would admit we are not a perfect party, but we are a party that really would have transcended St. Kitts, and we are force for good. And I think that our track record speaks for itself. And so 90 years, which means we would have gone through many different generations, but we still remain relevant. Today, our party is still the largest party in St. Kitts and Nevis. Even though we are not at the helm of the government at this time, we would have enjoyed a significant number of years, given the opportunity by the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and at one point Anguilla, really to lead the affairs of our federation. And so we are very, very proud of that. And so I would always say, and history will bear us out, that the history of St. Kitts and Nevis is really tied to the history of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, and by extension, the history of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Movement. And I say the Labour Movement because now I'm marrying the Labour Union.
Right.
Remember, unions were illegal in St. Kitts and Nevis, and so the union was established in 1940. It was illegal to unionize. And so I just want to run through a few of the things that people may not know, that quickly people can understand when I say that this is history of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party is really so connected to the history of St. Kitts and Nevis that you cannot separate the two really. We have the right to vote in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I want people to know that it was the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Movement that brought that right. We had what you call adult suffrage. That's a big word to say that we gained the right to vote in 1952. That is very recent in the trajectory of history.
Yes,
Before
indeed.
that, our people couldn't vote. They had all kind of stipulations. If you don't own land, you have this amount of money and all sort of things to really block the majority of poor people who were black people, who were basically descendants of slaves could not have had the opportunity to vote. And the St. Kitts Nevis labor movement fought for that. And I want to, of course, say that the uprising in 1935, the Buckley's uprising, and I don't think we should ever call it a riot. It was an uprising.
Right.
People were being oppressed, and they rose up. And we know that about 3 persons were killed for the rights that we enjoy today. So when we look abroad and we see persons like Mandela, Martin Luther King, and all those who was Steve Biko and so forth, persons who would have given their lives for the advancement of black people fundamentally, or the advancement of human beings fundamentally, we have our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And of course, I would mention the leaders of the labor movement, from Manchester to Robert Llewellyn Bratcher, down to Limo, Dr. Denzel Douglas, Paul Southwell, and down to myself. Well, Paul Southwell came just after Bratcher, of course. So we have had a long trajectory. Our party is an inclusive party, a party that does not discriminate on any lines whatsoever. Even from its inception, we had white people who were part of the St. Kitts Nevis labor movement. We had, black people fundamentally, yes, but we are a party, an inclusive party, because we believe fundamentally in principles, and the principles are guiding us even up to date. So I just wanted to drop that caveat that when people think of labor, think about the movement that would have given you the very right to vote. So each time you go to vote, I want people to remember that it's the St. Kitts Nevis labor movement that brought that, fought for that. People gave their life for that. And we should not ever forget that. That is why I said to people, do not sell out your vote cheap. Your vote is valuable. People gave their lives for it. People die so that you can have that right. And anything that where blood was shed to be had should not be sold out cheaply. And therefore, I would say to people that your vote is very, very sacred, and you should exercise it as such. I don't know, there are other caveats to know that the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party is who brought comprehensive secondary education in the 1960s to St. Kitts and Nevis. That means every person who born in St. Kitts and Nevis, irrespective of where you're from, your economic background, standard, whatever, you had the right to a secondary education. So the fact that we are 90-something% literate today, and we know that our people are well educated, it is because of that foundation again that was laid by the St. Kitts Nevis labor movement. At that time, it was a revolutionary act to free up education to poor black people.
I think
it was a revolutionary act.
I think one of the things too with that is for us to recognize that this ain't no ancient history, that we're talking about.
It's 1968 we're talking.
They're people. I can't even say a lot. There are people who still in the workforce and all of this who never had a secondary education.
Right.
I mean, I talk to my grandfather about it all the time. I mean, like, when time to go school, sometimes you gotta make up your mind if you're going in the ground or you're going to school.
Yes.
Because once you reach whatever standard, 7th standard or whatever, that's it.
Yes, and that is the truth. And Robert Bratcher at that time insisted, and the Minister of Education then was Fitzroy Bryant, and they insisted that, our people had to go to school until 16 years old. At least 16 years old. And so they made it possible as far as possible to make sure that you had the conditions. If you talk to your grandfather further, he'll tell you about the truancy officers who will come around and make sure that you didn't go in the cane field to work, that you were getting an education. But I say again, it was revolutionary because even up to today, there are countries in the Caribbean who do not have comprehensive secondary education.
Yeah, that is true.
So I wanted to drop that. I also wanted to drop even healthcare. Universal healthcare was established here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And if you or Jade were to speak to your great-grandparents, they would tell you that people had no healthcare, principally. Actually, women used to born their children sometimes in cane fields because they had to work so much and so hard that sometimes in the very cane fields that they had to deliver their children, had no access to medical care, nursing care, good midwifery care. And that was changed. So when you see St. Kitts full of clinics, every village you go into, you see a clinic. Think about it. That was established then in the 1960s. And we know that the JNF hospital was also built during that time, during 1966. So here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we had a lot of things happening in with respect to development of country, in education, in healthcare. And the JNF was established in the 1960s. About 1966, the construction would have started. So I just wanted to drop that because we don't have much time.
Right.
But it was not only health and education, but the labor movement ensured that social security was established. Before that, we had the Providence Fund. And then after that, we had the establishment of the Social Security in the 1970s. And it was passed on the 5th of December, 1977. Everybody now enjoys some level of Social Security. So because people used to work in the sugarcane fields, and when they could not work anymore, they went into abject poverty. There was nothing for them to have. Providence Fund came and it helped, and to really advance it, Social Security was established. So that again was established by the St. Kitts Nevis labor movement.
I'm listening to you speak, right? And
Yes.
one of the things that I would hope that, again, like you said, based on the time constraints that we have,
Yes.
it might not be possible for us to go into depth with some of these things. But I think these history about the road to where we are very
Yes.
important.
Very.
Right, very important. You're talking about the Providence Fund and know that what we know as Social Security.
Yes.
And understanding that actually came from basically monies that would have been paid to the colony.
Yes.
For sugar and that whole dynamic between where the money came from. Because apparently the money was just kind of sat there because Bratcher decided he wasn't paying it out. Not to say he wasn't paying it
You
out,
mean the
but
Providence Fund?
yeah, but that's the story. And so
Right,
what I'm
so-
saying, even if some of this is cleared up,
So we have to clear up this
Yeah,
because
clear up some of that
that's not
because-
the total story at all with respect to that.
you're right.
But, and there was a transition into Social Security and to make sure that people had something to start with.
Right,
That
right.
their own money would not have been given to the state or anyone else. It would have been their money that would have been transferred.
Yeah,
So that
I know
money
there was
had
a Goslow-
always
a Goslow,
belonged to them,
yeah.
and that money would not have been touched. And therefore,
Yeah.
we need some acceleration on that.
Yeah.
But the Social Security was a modernized form of creating a pension system for our people. And they
Right.
would not have lost a cent from the Providence Fund because that would have been transferred. So we need to clear up that even that history. I want us to also touch on the land acquisition, because the land acquisition, when Bratcher did it in 1975, and he did it at Buckley's estate. Why he did it at Buckley's estate? Because in 1935, which would have been 40 years later, that is where you had the uprising of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the sugar workers who said they're not going to take the oppression anymore. And so in homage to them and to those who lost their lives, Bratcher went back to the very place where they gave their lives and spoke about the acquisition of the sugar lands. So the fact that a young person like you can say, boy, let me apply for a piece of land now, that is because of this act to acquire the land. And when he did it, he was called a communist. He was called the worst of names. But the principle was the majority of people in St. Kitts and Nevis would have been descendants from slaves. They worked 400 years with free labor. The land belonged to them. So why couldn't they enjoy their land? And Bratcher took this step to acquire the land in 1975. And so today we see our country being developed as a result of such a landmark and courageous and correct and moral thing to do by Bratcher, who was then the leader of the labor movement. And why am I going through these? Because we see all the building blocks that are needed to establish any society that is modern, democratic, progressive, that would give its citizens the opportunity to advance themselves. All of this was established between the 1960s and the 1970s. Access to land, access to healthcare, access to education, and so forth, those things, and social security, those things were established. But I also want to say that the Deepwater Harbor was part of that, because you cannot have a modern country without a harbor or access to international trade. The Robert Llewellyn International Airport, which is now after him, which was the Golden Rock back then, was also built because, again, you had to have had access to the outside world. So all these things, of course, were built and established by the St. Kitts Nevis labor movement so that our people could have enjoyed. And what we are enjoying today is because these men of integrity who were part of the movement really set out to establish the foundation that we can enjoy today. And so I want to pay homage to them. And so we are making 90 years of age. But I want to introduce you to a book, for example, before you ask the next question. This book is called The Truth About Robert Bratcher. And it was written by Glenroy Blanchett, who was a former member of PAM and also a PAM candidate. And he set out to look and for himself investigate, because there were so many myths about Robert Bradshaw, misinformation about the labor movement. And as a former PAM candidate, he said he wanted to find out the truth. And when he went and investigated and find out the truth, he recognized that he was dealing with a man of high integrity, high intelligence, competence, who had a vision for St. Kitts and Nevis, and who had a heart for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so I want to just show it. I hope the people can see it. It is written by Glenroy Blanchett. He makes, just like how you mentioned about the Providence Fund, there's a chapter in it on it where he did a lot of investigation. Blanchett is by no means a labor man. By no means, actually, he was a PAM candidate who fought against labor. And so he had no skin in the game, really, when he sought to find the truth. As a matter of fact, he might have started not with the objective of making Robert Bradshaw look good, I'm just saying. But at the end of the day, when he would have done and he found the truth, he gave us the truth. And so this is his book, The Truth About Robert Bradshaw, and I encourage people to read it. It is not written by a traditional labor person, but someone who independently researched and thought to put those in a book. Our party has another book called For the Good That We Can Do. That is our own book. And then there's another book, From Commoner to King, which was written by Whitman.
I like that
yes,
book,
intellectual. And he also put in that book a lot of the truths about Robert Bradshaw. So I just encourage our young people to look at this, to have a read, our people in general, so that they can learn the truth about many of the questions, even the one about Providence Fund and Social Security.
Okay, well, you mentioned some of the founding fathers of the Labour Party, as we can call them. What are you guys doing for this anniversary to commemorate those people who set the building blocks for the Labour Party?
Right. So the Labour Party has a number of activities. We're going to celebrate for the whole year. This is not a month celebration, a whole year. In the first month, of course, we had our church service, which we know was very well attended. We limit the numbers even because of the pandemic. We did not want to, but people came out in their numbers. And subsequently to that, we had the Red Day, where people took pictures in their red and we post them on Facebook, which also had a tremendous outpouring of support. And then just Saturday, we had what you call a constituency hop, where myself as the leader and the others within the leadership of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, members of the executive, and even some supporters join in. But the objective was that we go from constituency to bring attention to the labor movement's anniversary. And so that was part of it. So we are going to have every month a theme. This month's theme, or February's theme, will be the love theme. And so you'll see that we do a number of things as we lay it out for our founding fathers so that people can get to know them. So we'll have a lot of recognition for them, lecture series and so forth, so that people can become acquainted. So just listen out and we'll send you the updated flyer of the events that are already planned. But we'll recognize them through lecture series, through events, with young people, portraying them and so forth. So we have a whole plan that we'll lay out.
I mean, it's amazing to hear you speak about, some of the things attributed to the actions of the labor movement and the Labour Party over the years. It really seems as though it reads almost as somewhat of a roadmap for development, right?
Yes.
In St. Kitts. I do believe that at the time, the actions and agendas undertook by the movement was what was seen to be necessary.
Yes.
For where we were at. We are coming out of, let's be quite honest, as much as they say slavery ended whenever.
In the 1830s.
We know slavery existed in maybe under some other name or some other form.
Apprenticeship system and so forth.
Well into our recent history. Right? And so taking us out of that would have called for some of these agendas that you laid out.
Yes.
Now that the nation is where we're at now, what do you believe, or what is the Labour Party's view as to what is needed moving forward in terms of continuing this legacy of development. Because it might not be infrastructural at this point. It may not be, like education, setting up or modernizing in the way that we may have had to do in the past. So what is next?
Right. So that is a very good question. What is next? Now, what I would say is that we have not abandoned the basic principle, which is for the good that we can do. And if you recognize, and I can go from sector to sector, we are not there yet. And there will never be perfection in any sector. However, each generation has its needs, and we have to respond to them. Healthcare is not perfected at this point in time. We hear all the complaints about healthcare and so forth. We still do not have universal healthcare advanced to support the people. We still see people going around with sponsor sheets and so forth. I would say that a priority of mine would to eliminate that. That will be eliminated very quickly under a new Labour government. I, as a medical doctor, see people die who are supposed to be alive. I, in my own psychological makeup, cannot take that. And I don't think petitions on a whole can take that. You see mothers going around with sponsor sheets for the young children. And when you see these children die from curable diseases, if they had the resources, then that tells you really that something urgently needs to be done. So we have to advance that. When it comes to workers' rights, we are not there yet. Because just recently we see workers losing their jobs because they did not take a vaccine. I would say that I believe in the science of vaccine. I am not an anti-vaxxer, as people say. But there are two different issues here. Should a worker who has a reason or who is even hesitant, should we deny them work? Or should we make sure that they protect themselves and in the process we continue to educate them? So we still need laws to properly protect workers' rights, and a lot of people suffer. Even during this pandemic, when you look at the economic structure, those who suffered the most were those who needed the most help. When you look at the entertainers, for example, who is a legitimate industry, who had no income and no support whatsoever, who was suffering, those who are in micro businesses, maybe a one man has a job or he alone works for himself and then he's shut down and then he can't eat. Maybe he's in a job where he does odd jobs where he really can't keep up with the social security payment, or some of them don't even know. But he has a right to eat still if the country is shut down and he's denied the opportunity to make a living. When you look at the educational sector, why are we stopping at comprehensive secondary education? We need to advance it to tertiary education, where that too must become comprehensive, because the times are calling for us to advance all these things for the betterment of our people. And then there are new economies that are surfacing, the orange economy, where craft, entertainment and so forth, and the arts are becoming a fundamental part of economic development. When we look at sports and the opportunities that sports offer, if you look here, we did not mention any major thing about sports, but now we see we can do the necessary development and get St. Kitts and Nevis and our athletes to become earners in the sports world. We have very talented people, just like, for example, Jamaica would have developed its track and field program. We have not touched that as yet. Is there a sports school in St. Kitts and Nevis? There is none. So there's a lot to be done. When you look at the agricultural sector, back then in the 60s, 70s, it was all about sugar. Now we have moved beyond sugar, but we have not really developed our agricultural sector to be self-sustaining, or at least even give a serious dent into the food import bill. You know, it was really sad to hear that when people say, so how are we going to eat? And we said, the boats are still coming. What if things had gotten so bad that those boats could not come? What would we have eaten? Right. So even in that sector, there needs to be modernization and upgrade for our people. Within the political structure itself, people need to understand the vote is sacred and everything should be done to prevent the vote from being bought and sold. The vote cannot be bought and sold and expect to have a democracy. Anytime a vote can be bought and sold and it becomes the norm, your democracy is already on a decline. So even that, the system itself has to be protected. And so we want to strengthen these things, but we are going to modernize them, package them, and make them relevant for our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis at this time. So the future, the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party knows very well what to do to advance it. We'll be in touch with our people, speaking to them, and developing that program. So when you see us roll out, we'll roll out that big red machine, but it's all about the people for the good.
I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that it seems as though we have gone through several phases in terms of national development. I mean, initially, you would have spoken about the need for us to just obtain the rights to be able to determine our own destiny. When we talk about the Buckley's Uprising, talk about adult suffrage, and so forth and so forth. Once we obtain the right to determine, to be deterministic, then we would have had to start building the laying the foundation for what would have built up the society that we envision. I will believe that since then we have then gone through and building on those foundations, development of the tourism industry and stuff like that.
Right.
The development of our human resource in terms of now we have education, free education, and that's available to the majority of the population and things like that. What I'm hearing from you is that we need to further develop those areas, recognizing that we still have some work to do.
Yes.
Do you believe that within the context of, I don't even think it makes sense to say the Caribbean, but worldwide, do you believe that St. Kitts is positioned in any way now to really make a huge impact worldwide? And if so, in what areas? The reason I'm asking that is because as I asked the question, you're being answering. A lot of it I'm hearing has to do with almost fixing some of the issues with those things that we have built, right? And sometimes I feel like that view leaves a lot on the table. Meaning, I think because of our size, because of the area that we're in, the Caribbean, sometimes I believe that if we don't think innovatively and think sometimes 5, 6, 10 years, even 30 years down in the future, we are positioning ourselves to constantly be behind the bar.
Having to play catch up.
Yeah, having to play catch up. So is there any area that your party may have identified and even using some of our economies of scale or geographical location where you say, hey, this is a direction that we really want to push into and that might help to position the country to really make an impact on the global stage?
Right. So what you're asking is a very, very critical question. And I think that our country is positioned for it. We are well educated. For example, I will speak about the orange economy. That was an aspect that was not fully developed, where we now have to venture into different sectors. For example, our artists. There's no reason why our artists can't tap into the international market, have their music sold, given the opportunity to push that St. Kitts brand outside. That is an area that we have not tapped into as yet. Because when you listen to the artists around here and you see how talented they are and they lack the resources to get out there, we need to tap into that. When I think about our people being educated and having access to laptops and the technology really, why can't we? For example, people around the world look for entrepreneurs. I look for the opportunities for persons in these skill areas to do things for them. For example, India outsource that. Why is it we as a country cannot outsource that type of work? As you say, economies of scale. But if our people are so educated, there's no reason why a web developer in St. Kitts and Nevis cannot be doing work for people around the world in terms of the digital knowledge that they would have and the digital skills that they would have. That is an area that we definitely need to develop as such. And so there are opportunities. What about when you talk about healthcare? We have an infrastructure here. Why is it people can't be coming to St. Kitts, a warm climate, for example, to have certain surgeries done? Why is it our doctors, even when you talk about economies of scale, but I don't have to be a doctor just for people in St. Kitts and Nevis. If we are so structured and so organized and have that quality, we can bring in people from overseas to come to St. Kitts to receive care. So even though we are small, there are areas that we can develop such, not just to serve our small population, but of such quality that we can really serve throughout the region and throughout the world, because the market is there. And once we develop our people, they can take advantage of these things. And that is why I talk about micro business. You can have a man, he can be so good that he establish a business. For example, let's say you have a dressmaker, for example, in St. Kitts, and she's so good. Why she shouldn't be given the opportunity to make dress for people in the Caribbean and beyond? Why? I mean, you have good transport system, communication system. So our people have to stop thinking that we just have to, if we are thinking that way, that we just have to serve 50,000 people. I want us to think beyond that. So I hope that when Win FM is broadcasting and your show is broadcasting, you're not just thinking about our small island, you're thinking about how I can get into St. Martin, how I can get into this, so that you can widen your scope. That is why you're on the internet. And so you can present a show that will even be attractive to those beyond the shores of St. Kitts and Nevis. Even when it comes to sports, we have to develop our people. We have a Patriot team. The Patriot team, the players make a lot of money. There are men in St. Kitts and Nevis, women in St. Kitts and Nevis who are into sports. Why can't we develop them to take advantage of these opportunities? So we have to think big, because we've always thought big. We gave the Caribbean a universal health system, secondary education. We acquired the land for our people, established social security. Even when they say we were too small to do these things, we proved to the colonizers that we indeed could have educated our people, developed our people to a point now where St. Kitts ranks among the high-income countries in the world, and 98% literate, when just in the 1960s, just before the 1968, our people could not go to school. So it's a very short history in which we would have transformed our people. So I want us to keep those innovations in our head, educate our people, and they will come up with the innovation, because I don't have all the answer. Once you educate our people, give them the opportunities, you will be surprised what they come up with. I have seen some things on the internet. I'm sure you have seen them. And I'm like, that is in St. Kitts? A St. Kitts person did that? For example, I went to aquaponics farm the other day, and I saw how aquaponics on a small piece of land supplying the hotels.
Right.
Why can't we get our young people who study in agriculture at the Clarence Fitzroy College to come together to create these and supply the Marriott and supply in a quality that they will, of course, buy?
Right.
And we already doing it on a small scale. We have to expand it and use innovation, technology, education to create that new economy where people can be innovators, entrepreneurs, and not just be subjected to just having a job here and there, which is also important, of course.
All right, man. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for, again, taking the time out to just come and hang out with us.
Yes.
You're a friend of the show.
Yes.
And it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure for sure.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to what the Labour Party has in store over this upcoming year. And again, congratulations to you guys on reaching such a big milestone.
Big milestone.
Big milestone.
Thanks again. Morning tea. Wish you all success. And right here is a lot of innovation and great ideas. I love it. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All.
Well, Azim, just like that, Monday's finished.
Monday,
for us, anyway.
yeah.
Us, not for y'all who at work.